So welcome to the first Community Resilience Leadership session in 2023. This is exciting to be here for our first ever inaugural class. As you're coming in, please mute your audio so that we have a good connection. I'm Leslie Meehan. I am the MC for tonight, welcoming everybody who's joining us and thanking all of our partners so far. We are going to have more partners by the time we're done, we're sure, but we're very grateful for those who have stepped up to help host this series. And we're grateful to the sponsors who have made it fiscally possible for us to host this program for the first time. I am a member of the Silicon Valley Interreligious Council Board, which is a lead partner and sponsor, and I am the catalyst for bringing this class together in the first place because I've been working with community resilience for well over 10 years now across the country. I founded the Thriving Resilient Communities Collaboratory and have met amazing people doing very inspiring work across the country. And I decided I wanted to do that work at home too, where I live. So I'm happy to be meeting you amazing people who are doing incredible work. So here we go. Let's dive into the agenda for tonight. So I'm Dr. Leslie Meehan here with Robin, Whitney, and Susan, who you'll be meeting later. This is a quick overview of the rhythm for this evening. We're going to follow this pattern through the whole series where we're going to be hearing people speak, and we're going to be having discussions in breakout groups, in a couple different kinds of breakout groups. Tonight, we're going to be looking at what's resilience, what does it mean to be a resilience leader. I'm going to be breaking out into teams. Well, you'll hear more about that later. We'll then hear some models and stories, break out into discussion groups again, and then close with our next steps. And I'm going to let everybody know we're going to be sharing the slides and the videos afterwards. You can just relax. You don't have to scribble too fast. And we're going to be asking you to put your questions and comments in the chat so that people who are monitoring the chat for us can help answer your questions. You also have a chance to ask them in breakout groups, and I can stick around afterwards to answer more questions. Okay. So we're going to open our program circle acknowledging the Indigenous Native stewards of this South San Francisco Bay Area land. And I encourage you to check out this Native Lands website so you can see all the different tribes that have been stewarding this place that we call home for many generations. And we are continuing that stewardship all together, and may this class help us be better stewards today and for our great-great-grandchildren. Thank you for being here. Next, we're going to do a quick overview of the whole program, all 4 sessions. And I want to start out by saying this is a pilot program. We're learning together. We just built the field, and here you are, and we will meet each other and learn how to support each other as leaders in our neighborhoods and in our site facilities and in our bigger hubs. And we'll talk more about what that means later. We've got 4 themes. Tonight is the overview and meeting each other and stories. And then we have 3 more themes. These themes apply anywhere. This model works anywhere, but the stories we're going to tell are from the South San Francisco Bay Area. So the next session is going to be April 12th on emergency readiness and response. Hands up just to show who is here wearing mainly an emergency response hat. Who's that their hottest topic? I can't see everybody, but I see some hands up. Great. All right. And then the next session, we're calling mutual support. It's different ways that we support each other through helping people with food insecurity and housing instability and public health concerns, and how we share things amongst our neighbors and friends, tool share systems, and who says that's their highest or hottest priority in resilience. You have any hands there for the community support people? I see some.
Can you put your hands up for all of it?
Yes, you can. And we're going to, great thing. We're going to do that at the end. So then the last session is sustainability and climate readiness, and who puts their hand up mostly for that? Yeah, I know I can put my hand up for all of them too. And how many of us can put our hands up for all of them, or maybe we're not so sure, so we put it up anyway. And that's actually the point, that we may, we're going to discover even more how all of these themes are interconnected through the course. And by the time we end the course, we want to have not only learned more about what's available here in our region, but form a resource directory of our favorite programs and websites to be able to refer people to. We're going to be practicing equity, compassion, and collaboration at our leadership center by sharing best practices and principles of resilient leadership and having our own agreements. And then we're going to act. We're going to get things done. We're going to invite people to take a resilience challenge, to do some research for yourself and choose for yourself what kind of goal you have that you want to accomplish by the time the class is over on May 31st. And then we hope and dream that many of you will be involved afterwards in programs that you learn about here. Maybe you already knew about them, but you're learning more about them. You're finding other people who want to do it together with you. So that will keep you busy going forward. And most of all, it's all about relationships. So we want to strengthen connections and build more of a partner circle for those of us who are thinking together about where are we and what are the gaps in building resilience in this region, and how can we think of new ways to help fill those gaps together. Everybody still with me? All right, that was the quick run through of the program. And now take a deep breath. So we're going to dive into the topic for the evening, which is, what is resilience? What do we mean by that word? One of my favorite definitions comes from the Institute for Sustainable Communities. It says it's the ability of people and their groups and the systems they develop to be able to manage disruption and build forward, by bouncing forward to build stronger communities afterwards. And I say resilience is a one-word label for the many different things that different people consider to be the vision for the kind of communities that they want to live in. I'll ask you now to just take a moment to jot down a couple notes for yourself about what does resilience mean to you to share in your team breakout. Or you could put your thoughts in the chat too, if you're interested. Everybody have enough time to jot down a couple thoughts? Okay. So where are we going with resilience? Resilience happens at many different scales, and resilient regions from a systems perspective are the tipping point because they're in the middle. They're in between the larger scale systems at the national and global level, call them the top-down systems. And they're on top of the neighborhoods and the communities that are doing the work from the bottom up, building the community gardens and doing CERT trainings and all the things that you do closer to home. But regions have not only the connections from top to bottom, but they have the size to be able to develop impactful systems. And they also are close enough to home that people know each other and can travel to see each other. So regions are very important. And within the region, we're going to use this model for resilient places in this class. So we have 3 scales within the region too, starting closest to home with resilience neighbors or groups. These are people like any of us who could get together with our neighbors, with our people in our apartment buildings, and with our book club or our Rotary Club to do some program together, even if you don't have a shared facility. So maybe you might get your neighbors together to take a CERT training together, and you end up with lots of CERT trained people in your neighborhood. That's a goal of mine, actually, coming out of this class. That may be my resilience challenge. And then the next level up is a site. That's where you have a shared facility where often it's there for some other purpose, like you're educating children or you're running a business, but you decide, no, I want to run some sort of program for resilience for the public at my site. Our local library just hosted some climate conversations. And then there's the full service resilience hubs. These are the bigger, larger scale sites that have public programs that might run several different kinds of programs. And there's an urban sustainability directors network model called Resilience Hubs. And they've got a 64-page Resilience Hubs PDF that describes what a Resilience Hub is. And you can find that at that link when I send the slides afterwards. California has defined, the California Strategic Growth Council has defined community resilience centers as within California, that's the kind of hub that they're developing. That also is an important model that is at that website. Often hubs are actually formed from collaborative sites that work together, because maybe everybody can't do everything at their one site, but they could partner with another organization in their area and do things together. So I know this is a lot to think about. So here's just to help you get an idea of what this really looks like on the ground. Here are some kinds of projects and programs that people can do at these different levels. And you'll notice that it's kind of a fuzzy boundary between them. You could have a group of neighbors that decide they're going to contact their local school to see if they can have a public community garden at their school. So you can be kind of both. And same thing with sites. They could partner with a bunch of other sites to form a network of cooling and heating centers for weather disruption in their area. But this is just a general idea of the kind of the scale of things that can happen. And now it's time for you to choose who you would like to be in a breakout with during each of the sessions. What kind of folks are doing similar work that you're interested in that you could talk about together? So I'm going to do a poll here in a minute to ask you to choose whether you'd rather be in a group of individuals who might be neighbors or, you know, in the same club together, that you're each wanting to build resilience with other individuals. Or maybe you want to be in a group of people who run sites, who are stepping up to do more with their site for resilience. Or maybe you're working at a large scale already and you want to be in a group with other people who are working at that scale. Or maybe you don't really care, you could be anywhere and you'd be happy, that's fine too. So let me start the poll and just ask you to go ahead and answer the poll for you. And that's going to give us a sense of how many groups of each type we need. And we have a bet going to see whether we've guessed right. Okay. Let's see. Is that enough to give us a sense of how many groups we need? Susan, would you say? You want to run it a little bit longer?
Let's run it a little bit longer. And Leslie, can you please make a co-host? Oh no, I see it now. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks to the great team that's helping pull this together. Takes a village. All right, if we could have well, some of us probably can't do it because we're co-hosts. I think that's probably good because some of the people who aren't answering the poll are probably leading the groups anyway. So let's end the poll, okay, Susan? We'll give it our best shot.
Sounds great.
All right. That's how we've ended up. My gosh, look, we have more neighbor and interest group leaders than we expected. Oh, okay. That's very cool. There's no bad answer here. No wrong answer. Okay. So now, while Susan's putting the groups together, I'm going to take us on a quick lightning round overview journey about my experience of resilience leadership. Resilience leadership is kind of a big topic. I've been in, leadership sessions, training sessions that have been weeks long, or maybe a session every month for a year. There's a lot to learn. And so I wanted to just digest them down into values, practices that resilience leaders follow. I'm going to offer a program agreement that I hope that for the scope of the class, we can all be happy to agree with. And I'll share some principles for larger resilience collectives and then some resources. And again, this is just a quick overview. I will be hosting a breakout session later on in this class if you want to delve into this in more detail, and I'll be available too. But let's go. So resilient places don't just sprout from the ground. They need to start with resilient leaders and small groups. And we'd like to say there's a leader in every seat. All of us, just because we're here in this class, we are resilient leaders. Thank you for stepping up. And as Margaret Mead says, groups get things done. Small groups of thoughtful, committed citizens do change the world, and it's the only thing that ever has. And in my experience, the thing that really makes or breaks resilience is the people relationships. It's whether people feel trusted and trusting, and whether they feel like they belong or not. It's not whether you have the technical skills to install a solar farm or whether you are CERT trained. It's how well you can work together with different kinds of people to collaborate and get things done. I like to paraphrase Meg Wheatley to say that we have the relationships and we have the resources that we need in our communities. And to strengthen our community, we just have to connect it to more of itself, which is what we're doing in this class. And why? Why are we each here spending our Wednesday evening in a resilience leadership class? And I'll ask you again to take a moment to jot down a couple notes to share in your team, or to put your comments in the chat about why are you a resilience leader? And as you're thinking about that for yourself, I'll share my own story that for me, resilience is the practice of getting along with people across differences in politics and religion and geography to be able to take care of each other and the places that we live in so that our great-grandchildren can thrive. It really comes down to love, really, and wanting to make a difference. And for me, resilience is the practice of active hope, as my mentor, Joanna Macy, calls it. She's written a lot of books. I really recommend them and her. She's really an inspiration. I look forward to knowing what inspires you. And I find that resilience leaders hold what I call whole community values. It's the things you learned in kindergarten: caring and sharing. The permaculture ethics are people care, earth care, fair share, and I add community care, where we treat each other with respect and dignity. We practice equity, racial, social justice, and compassion and collaboration are more formal words for caring and sharing. When we get together in groups, we practice respectful belonging. The name I usually use is collaborative leadership or co-leadership for short. It's a different form of organizing model where everyone's voice is respected. And there are different power with systems such as group agreements and making decisions by consent, which is more effective than consensus. So there's ways that we work together, and it's also who's at the table, who's in the room when decisions are being made. Inclusion, inviting people with diverse lived experience. And also, so lived experience, this is my model of the values in the center, the lived experience around the outer ring. And then also making sure that you have multi-stakeholders that are representing the public, government, agencies, private business, and people, both nonprofits and neighbors, so that you're forming partnerships that bring the strengths of all of these different groups together, because that's what we need. Here are some sample agreements. Don't try to read them all now, but they've been inspiring to me, so I wanted to share them with you. The simple one that we're going to plan to use here is to treat each other with respect, to trust our own voice, and that we can build trust with each other. The main practice there is practicing confidentiality. So you can share what you learn, but not other people's personal stories. And awareness, I usually like to use the step up, step back model, which means you share time. So that if you're someone who tends to speak a little more, maybe you might want to step back and let somebody else speak. Or if you are somebody who doesn't speak very much, which frankly is usually me, although you won't know it tonight, then you can speak more. Because together we know a lot. When groups gather together in larger collectives, partnerships of organizations, networks, they tend to follow principles that have been developed by thousands of people over thousands of hours, have gotten together and come up with charters or principles or goals for how they want to work together, starting way up at the UN. Check these out, the Sustainable Development Goals. If you haven't checked them out, they're pretty awesome. And these other ones too. I'm going to do a shout out to Charter for Compassion, which is the anchor principle for Compassionate California. Santa Clara County is the first compassionate county in the world. And Civic and Senator Dave Cortese were key players in making that happen. And California is the first compassionate state. And the Compassionate California work that I've seen happening that brings government agencies and nonprofits and businesses together across the whole state is really inspiring. So check it out. And finally, here are some of my favorite resources. I'm sure you have plenty to add. We'll be asking your resources later. In the South Bay area, these are the groups that I know of right now that offer resilience leadership kinds of training and resources for groups that are trying to resolve conflicts. And then also here are some of my favorite groups beyond the Bay. The Bioneers Conference is happening in Berkeley this year in just a couple of weeks. So I'm going to shout that out now. In case anybody wants to go, let me know. I'll be up there for at least part of it. Love to meet you there or go up together. And that is our whirlwind tour of resilience leadership. Everybody still here? Okay. All right, so now it's time to take what we have learned about resilience so far and talk about it together in our organizing teams. So I'm going to turn this over to Susan to set up the teams. We have a leader facilitating each group, and Susan will identify who that is. These are the questions that we'd like people to talk about in each group. We'd also like you to just hopefully be able to consent that this team agreement of respect, confidentiality, and step up, step back is something that's good enough to try during the scope of this training. You? All right, welcome back from your team breakouts. Please mute yourself while folks are presenting, and then put your questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer them either in the chat or in the breakout sessions after these stories. And thank you to Susan Silber, Whitney Ramos, and Robin Porter, who are joining us as storytellers now for the next half of the program. Susan, I've been working with for many years now. She's a resilience expert who lives in the East Bay, and she has a lot of expertise on resilience hubs. So she's going to be sharing some of the models from that program. And then Whitney is the Sustainability Engagement Director for the City of Mountain View and runs a program called Collaborate Mountain View, and she's going to be telling that story. And both of these stories cover all the resilience themes. So they have pieces of disaster and community support and climate and sustainability. And Robin will be sharing the story of the Loma Prieta Community Foundation to wrap up our storytelling. So Susan, please take it away.
All right. Thanks so much, Leslie, for having me. It's just such a pleasure to be here. Coming from Berkeley, not too far away, but yeah, here to talk a little bit about the different modes of resilience. And thank you so much to a organization called the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, and they are a network of government officials that work around resilience, and they really birthed the concept of resilience hubs, which are really looking at sites like places of worship and community centers, etc., as places where we can disseminate information and we can disseminate where people can go when there's power outages, etc. So getting to the modes of resilience, looking at first of all, the everyday mode, which is hopefully most of the time, but these days it seems like we are just like in disruption mode a lot of the time. But in everyday mode, when everything is going great, there's no disruptions, and in can we have folks please mute themselves? That would be awesome. But in this time, we really want to be proactively planning for disasters, so that when there is a disruption, like for example, an atmospheric river, which happened like yesterday and might be happening, this weekend, we are ready. But in everyday mode, the focus is like on the services and the programming and building relationships like we are doing tonight. And then during disruption mode, in when there's a flood or an earthquake, or COVID was sort of like the long-term disruption, we are just like ready to go. And they can last from a very short amount of time to years, like COVID has lasted, and they could be climate induced, natural, etc. So that's disruption. And then recovery mode is when we are trying to bounce forward to it being even better in everyday mode. So that's restoring services, and restoring the quote unquote normal conditions. And that's kind of what we're trying to do right now, right, with the atmospheric rivers, but just preparing for even more to come. So those are the three modes. Next slide. Yeah, just kind of like showing the example. I think you all are like living it right now. We are just living it. The everyday mode where we're like, what do we do? And ideally, we should be having scenario planning, like, okay, this is what we could be doing, although sometimes we just don't. It's so hard to plan for that. So everyday mode, maybe there's workshops like these, maybe there's scenario planning, etc. And then the disruption mode, in the moment, during the atmospheric rivers like yesterday. And then the recovery mode. I know that FEMA in the past month has been distributing funds, and they've opened up, and we've been opening up disaster recovery centers. So that's the recovery mode. So we're just living this real time, right? Next slide. And with Resilience Hubs, again, thank you to the USDN. We have 5 different components with these sites. The first being the services and the programming. It could be like, emergency preparedness workshop. It could be a garden workday. Like you see on the left, really helping to promote community preparedness. And by the way, it really helps us, improves our health and our well-being. And the second one being communications, so building relationships and making sure that things are set, ready to go during disasters. It could be anything from a listserv to, analog, off-grid communications, newsletters, phone trees, etc. And then the resilient buildings and landscapes mean that the building itself is ready to go. That could look like solar with battery backup. This is often very costly. That's the overlap with resilient powers, but with the resilient buildings, making sure that the building, let's say, is retrofit for earthquakes. We'd love to have sites be demonstrations for climate solutions like rainwater catchment or gray water system, community garden. And then moving to resilient power, ensuring that there is power when it goes off. Like today, in so many parts, there is not power. And this often, again, is very costly, but very needed. And then the operations piece, when there's, needing the committees, the staff to be trained, knowing how to distribute the food, the emergency materials. So that operates in every day and during disruption and recovery. So those are the 3 modes of resilience hubs and spaces and neighborhoods. Next. Am I going to go over the slide, Leslie, or am I waiting for that?
Oh, I think you could do the preview and give people the general idea and then talk about it more in your breakout session if you want to do that.
Yeah, so just previewing, and by the way, the state of California is providing about $270 million to support community resilience centers, and there's lots of sites, cities around the country that are really trying to get resilience hubs up and running. And a site assessment is simply looking like sort of a checklist of what your site could have to be a resilience place, to be a resilience hub. And this is just showing one piece of it around the infrastructure. And eventually it'd be great to have like sort of uniform guidelines around what a baseline resilient hub could be or look like. So I will be talking a little bit more about that in my breakout session. Next.
Thank you, Susan. Really appreciate your sharing your experience. And you can talk more with Susan in a breakout session shortly. And now we'll welcome Whitney, who's here to talk about Collaborate Mountain View.
Thank you. Is the volume okay, Leslie?
Sounds good to me.
Great. Thank you. So I'm Whitney Ramos. I work for the City of Mountain View Sustainability Division, and I do outreach and engagement. I'll be talking about a few programs focusing on the neighborhood group level and touch on some community-wide ones as well as a city representative. Don't worry about trying to read all of my presentation. I'll cover the key points, and you'll have it afterwards if you want to review anything in detail. Go to the next slide, please. And great, so Collaborate Mountain View is a website that acts as a central hub for engaging with our community about sustainability issues. This isn't exactly what the site looks like, but it has all the tiles. So if you visit the site, you'll see all of these. Right now, I'm going to speak about the 3 with the red boxes, Cool Block, Electrify Mountain View, and our plant-based eating program. First up is the Cool Block program. And one more slide. Thank you. If you haven't heard about it, Cool Block is a neighborhood or group-based deep dive into topics on resiliency, sustainability, and community building. The 8-session program that is provided to Cool Block leaders and participants goes through in-depth and provide resources for topics that include setting up your go bags and installing solar if you can, or home electrification as another example. In Mountain View, our Cool Block program has been a collaboration with Santa Clara County. We have matching funds for our program. Your city might not have Cool Block. It might have something similar though. The city of San Jose has a Climate Smart program. We've already talked, a lot of people here are CERT trained or have experience with FireWise. San Francisco has an interesting example called the Neighborhood Empowerment Network that has Strong Block program and Empowered Communities program. And if all else fails, you can always volunteer. Our sustainability division has a group of volunteers, as does the wider city, and community-based organizations, as you all know, being involved with many, also do this type of work. We have a volunteer fair in Mountain View coming up. So if you're looking to volunteer or to recruit volunteers and you work in Mountain View, reach out to me for more information about that. All right, next slide, please. In Mountain View, we had some really great outcomes from our Cool Block program. When asked what the top benefits were, the very top one, almost all respondents said, was meeting and building lasting relationships with their neighborhood was the top benefit, with their neighbors was the top benefit, followed by making positive impact on the environment and learning about the Cool Block topics. We have some testimonial from Cool Block participants who shared with us that they created a neighborhood in which they're learning from each other, watching out for one another, and sharing tools and extra produce from their gardens. Another group talked about how they invited the neighborhood into their homes for a show and tell to share what each of the Cool Block group members had been doing. And they started a every week during COVID social hour outside that continues to this day as an every other Friday social hour. So these are really deep and ongoing connections that we've seen from the Cool Block program. There's also some challenges. For us, it has been, and for other cities that we've spoken with, engaging with renters, low-income communities, and people who speak languages other than English. Not a lot of materials are available in those other languages. And then additionally, staff time is highly correlated to program success, and for a medium or small-sized city, that can really be a barrier. Next up, I will talk about Electrify Mountain View. It is a website that provides the service of personalized home electrification information. If you go to mountainview.yellowton.com, without even logging in, you'll be able to click on the rebates and incentives and also on the Learning Hub. So that's open to everybody. People who live or work in Mountain View can register to use the site. This landing page is available in the 4 languages that our city provides content in: English, Spanish, Chinese, and Russian. Once you're logged in, on the next slide, please, you'll see more options. The marketplace and notifications have opened up, and then the incentives are now personalized to the information that the user has input. Much of the site is now available in Spanish, which is the main content of the site will have your dollar potential savings and carbon potential savings, and you can look at a 1-year or 5-year time frame. Below that, it shows broken down into categories, the recommendations, how much they impact your life, and they're personalized again to the information I put in here as a runner, for example. There's also the ability to contact Yellowton for personal, even more personal, specific advice. Next slide, please. So on the Collaborate Mountain View website, we are trying to connect it to Electrify Mountain View and build that community that people found so valuable as part of Cool Block. So there's currently a forum, and we've asked people to share their experiences. Here's some examples of people who shared their upgrades and how much they're enjoying the benefits. For our program, our next step is to build home electrification ambassadors who can engage with people who are trying to make changes and who just need that personal information from someone who has been through the process. Electrified Mountain View is not available in every city, but your city might have a similar program. If not, the utilities all have ratepayer funded programs, so Silicon Valley Clean Energy and Central Coast Community Energy. Well, I know SCCE has great programs, but I would look into CCCE if you live in their territory. PG&E has the switches on, and then there are state and federal sites that have especially electric vehicle information. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next up is our resident-facing plant-based eating program, which focuses on making the public more aware of the plant-based options available and increasing their excitement and the accessibility of plant-based eating options. This program is primarily a lot of collaboration with other organizations around the Bay Area. Our most recent session was a Meatless Meetup, partnering with Actera and a chicken-based nonprofit called Chlorophyll. Before that, we partnered with Factory Farming Coalition and had the online environmental impacts of a plant-based diet session. We had an in-person tour partnering with Soil and Water Garden at the Latham Community Gardens, talking about plant-based eating, or a workshop about plant-based eating gardens. And the Food Empowerment Project, we partnered with to feature their founder, Lauren. And then the last one on there is a plant-based eating cooking demonstration where we collaborated with Chef Alex Curry. There are so many actions we can take every day that increase sustainability, build community, and support resilience. The momentum built by groups doing it together is such a valuable piece of taking action and moving forward. Because we can get so much done working together, I'm really big on making connections with and between people. So connect with me on LinkedIn and let's see what we can collaborate on. I'm all done, thanks.
Would help if I unmute. Thank you so much, Whitney. That's really inspiring. I want to go to some of your events, and I'm a fan of Cool Block also and other block neighborhood programs. It's so much easier to even, challenge each other to in your neighborhood to do a go bag, get it ready, or to take a class together or to go to a workshop together. That's the kind of thing we want to encourage people to do in the resilience challenge. Maybe we can go to the volunteer fair together. Maybe could you post in the chat when that is? Post some information about that.
I included 2 backup slides that Leslie will include when she sends out the presentation, and the volunteer fair information is on there, as well as links to all the sites I've talked about. The volunteer fair is Saturday, April 15th. I'll definitely be there, but if you want to table as an organization, reach out to me before then, and I can connect you to the right people.
Thanks. Okay. Next up is, there's the backup slide she was talking about. Look at that. And here's Earth Day. It's another wonderful
Since I
celebration.
didn't go over time, many places are having Earth Day celebrations. We're having ours on the actual Earth Day, which is a Saturday also. And we're currently doing a poll on what people are interested in seeing. So if you're nearby to Mountain View or might want to come to our event, go ahead and take that poll. Thank you.
Thanks, Whitney. All right, next up is Robin to tell the story of
Resilience.
resilience, but from a the Loma Prieta Community Foundation perspective, but go ahead, Robin. Thank you.
It's actually from a whole mountain perspective.
Okay.
One thing that's pretty cool is in our one of the resources you have is in our attendee list. If you look down, you'll see Sanjay Khandawal, and he's the president of the Loma Prieta Community Foundation. And that's an integral part of the resilience network that we've built across the Loma Prieta mountain range. And that's the range from San Jose up and over to Santa Cruz. And it goes all the way towards Highway 84 and all the way to like Corralito, Swatsonville area. So it's a big swath of people, all of which are disjointed from each other physically. But I would say we have one of the strongest networks that I've ever experienced, which is pretty darn cool. So as I go through this, I'd like you to think of 3 different parts of community. One is people, and you tend to think of people that attend fairs and things like that, or parents in the school system, but you have to include all the people, and that goes from youth to elderly, employed to unhoused to disabled. So think about all the residents and what the attributes are. It also includes animals, both domesticated and wild. And nature, both domesticated and wild. So if you look at the, you might think, well, this is only because we're in this mountain range, but the Santa Rosa fires took out just, I cannot say how many square miles of subdivisions, not suburbs, but subdivisions in Santa Rosa, just because those residents didn't realize that they needed FireWise, fire safe certification, and they were a very densely populated fuel load for this fire that came barreling through. So this is not just mountain specific. This applies probably, if not more so, to urban and to suburbs throughout. And then we already talked a little bit about the states of resilience, the everyday state of community. And unfortunately, we haven't been in there very long. But there's disjointed, like the neighbors don't know each other, to emerging, you get some idea of community, to a solid network. And then to aging, we have some parts of our community that's aging out, and we're not seeing, mostly because of the high prices of homes, we're not seeing the youth coming in. And so how do you encourage that? And then after one of these disruptions, to experience the rebirth of everyday community is important. And then we all actually have our PhDs in disruption these days, between the fires and the earthquakes and winds and rains, and also political disruption can happen. And also personality disruptions can happen. We had a very divisive thing happen in our school, and it tore our community apart for a while. So you have to look at all these, not just, earth, wind, and fire. And then the recovery, and what are you going to do for that? Okay, so next slide. So I built this matrix. Think of it, it's something simple to just put in your head. It's a tic-tac-toe board. And there's regular community disruption and rebuilding, and there's people and nature and animals. And what I would challenge everyone to do is keep this in as you go out and you do an inventory of the assets in your own area. Okay, so the next slide. So if you look at the assets in our area, they're government-based. So we have elected, like county supervisors, Semidian and Manu. And we're in kind of a hard spot because we're on top of the mountains. So half of our elected officials are in Santa Clara County, and the other half are in Santa Cruz County. And not only do we have to convince one or the other, we have to get them both to agree. So try that with a politician. So then the next is we have different agencies and schools, like we have the Loma Prieta School District, which is the middle school and the elementary, but we also have a preschool. Then look at as you're doing this inventory of who is in your community, don't forget the responders like the sheriffs and the fire and the CERT organizations and Red Cross, but also look at other ones like the large animal rescue or the foster program for animals. There's the pit bull foster people or the Cocker Spaniel foster people. Those, they may have an everyday sense of what they do in their work, but they also have a disruptive day, right? They have to break into a whole different thing for when disruption hits. And we have a group up here called Mountain Neighbors Helping Neighbors. And it's as simple as one lady keeps a list of anybody who says, I'll be a volunteer. And if we have someone who is disabled or elderly and they have a doctor's appointment, she arranges for, she just puts out a thing. Hey, can anybody help Betty get to the doctors? And then, or to surgeries or take care. And she parses up the jobs to be really small. And over her network of volunteers, she manages to take care of many people in this mountain. And then there's the regular community organizations like the Lions Clubs and the Elks and the Boy Scouts. And those are important people not to forget because they can add so much and do a lot of the legwork for you. So when a task seems like a big community event seems so hard to organize, boy, if you just give each one of these groups a little piece, your work is done. Then there's Firewise, Fire Safe. We talked about, we have an environmental group called the Go Green. We have the Loma Prieta Community Foundation, but we also have the Loma Prieta Educational Foundation, which is, it's a fundraising vehicle for the school. We also have our faith-based organizations like Mountain Bible, Skyland, LDS, and Christ Child that have food pantries. And I know Melanie's on this list, and they service something like 1,000 meals a month or something, 1,000 families a month, which is for a mountain community, that's a big thing, right? And we have other things that the Loma Prieta Club, it's a women's group that's been here since 1905. It has a membership of like 50 people. And then the History Museum, that's another group. They throw Pioneer Day. And so there's the men Celtic singers and wineries and gardening clubs. There's this huge network of all these different groups. And if you take an asset list of every one of these groups, you can start to build this huge network of volunteers. And then you can meet with each one of them. And as you do, like the History Museum throws Pioneer Day as an example. Well, I went to them with this chart and said, it's really great you do, Pioneer Day. What else could you do in time of disruption? And one of the guys, Roger Mason, has an orchard, a big orchard, and he has a farm stand. And he said during the Loma Prieta earthquake, he let people pitch tents. And because he's a farm and a farm stand, he has to have commercial bathrooms or at least lots of bathroom facilities. And so he was home to many people in the middle of the Loma Prieta earthquake because he could host them and he could open up his stores of food and help feed them. And he also, because he's a farmer, he has a network of who has heavy equipment like excavators and tractors and front loaders and all this hard equipment. And so by showing these people, the leaders of each one of these groups, like let them be who they love to be, but say, okay, that's who you like to be in regular community. What can you do in the times of disruption? And challenge them, what can you do in the times of rebuilding? Okay, Leslie, if you go to the next slide. So we have what I call a common interest-based model, and we had potholes. And so a couple of guys were like, we want to fix this. And so they formed the Pothole Vigilantes, and they got donations and they gathered support and they went out and plugged the potholes. And that was a limited charter and a limited time frame group of volunteers who banded together. But as quickly as it went together, it soon fell apart. So the next model that I like better is the one that Sanjay is in charge of. So if you go to the next slide, Leslie. The Loma Prieta Community Foundation is a 501c3, and it straddles both Santa Cruz and Santa Clara County. And so we take, for that same pothole conversation, we go, we need to do that. We get community donations and we handle those in the 501c3. And then we dole out the money as receipts are presented, so that there's an ongoing fund that can handle that group. The mountain community also needed a fire engine. And those are expensive. They're like $450,000. And we did the same thing. We got with the volunteer fire department. They got the word out. We took in the community donations. And 3 years later, we had a $450,000 water tender sitting right there. And we donated it to the county to serve us. So when the Loma Prieta fire victims, when the fire rolled through, there are organizations that don't necessarily want to give money to each victim, but they want money dispersed to all the victims. And so Sanjay and our treasurer went and formed a group that went up to the fire victims, and they formed a point system, for lack of a better word, to do it. And they figured out how, like if you just lost an outbuilding or you just lost some shrubbery, it's so many points. But if you lost your whole house, that's another set of points. If you're completely wiped out, that's another set of points. And they took the total community donations and the Red Cross donations and the Home Depot cards and all the money that came in to help the Loma fire victims. And then based on the point system they got the money out in an equitable sense. So this is a 501c3 that serves all the organizations and all the communities up here. So Leslie, if you can go to the next slide. Just some history I already talked about, we're in both. So go to the next. Some of the projects that we've done, we built this community center / gym in between our two schools, our elementary and our middle school. It was $1.7 million, and it was built for joint use between the school district and us. And then we coordinated upgrades like a Red Cross kitchen and emergency generators. So go to the next. And here's just some of the projects we've managed to do that we already talked about that, but we built in a Redwood amphitheater and a pathway, and we do tons of events like free movie nights for our whole community. We do mountain residents night out. We host all the recreation programs up here, theater in the mountains, the preschool, and we give grants to Boy Scouts and students, and we're kind of like we are the hub. We are the hub of the mountains. So go to the next. In the disruption and recovery, let's go to the next one. We had, in the middle of COVID, we threw a fundraiser with over 350 people. And we didn't do this by ourselves. We got the Lions Club because we had to stay physically apart. So we took this huge field and we made 15 by 15 foot blocks. And we got on some Eventbrite or Ticketmaster, one of those, and we did the battleship board, like A5, like we did the blocks, and then we put 8-foot aisles between each one of these blocks, and we made it so families could go down an aisle and not get within 20 feet of anybody else, and they could pod onto one of those 15 by 15 foot squares that we use soccer chalk line, grid on the ground of the playground. And we got lemonade was provided by LPCF. We brought in the Home and School Club. They brought in 2 taco trucks and a Kona ice truck. The school provided the facilities, and we helped coordinate, and we brought in a brand, and we brought in a movie. And so 300 plus mountain residents showed up. They could stay physically apart from each other. And yet we were still a community, and a big community, not just one small neighborhood. Okay, go to the next. Oh, that's it.
I think that's all I had. So, well, that's all I had anyway.
Well,
If we're missing anything, sorry about that.
Can I give one more story, Leslie? Just a quick one. So it's
It's got
about
to be real quick because we need to
Very
get into our breakouts.
It's very quick. So we have a preschool, and some moms of the preschool said, we have all these clothes left over. And that was really cool. And all the moms brought in the clothes that their kids had outgrown, and they sorted them all. And then they got to come back in, and they got to pick the next size up clothes for their kids. It was like they made a little target out of the preschool. Well, they had so many clothes left over. And at the same time, our Skyland Church runs the food bank. And I talked to them and I said, man, how are things going? They said, it's so sad. We have all these people showing up at the food bank and their kids don't have the right clothes. They don't have shoes and they don't have coats and all that. And I'm like, let's get with the preschool. So we formed synergy between multiple groups, and those clothes were fed into the food bank, who went home with the unhomed people. So if you can the biggest thing is get your asset list, but get your asset list talking to each other. That's my point.
And that's partnership, public-private people partnership too, because I know there's businesses involved in this too, and government agencies. So thank you so much, Robin, for this story of this resilience hub that's really a constellation of sites and all the good work that you do. So some pretty powerful stories. I hope you've enjoyed them. And now we're going to hop into breakouts one more time. It's our last activity for the evening.